I'll get it right.
It's open to debate.
Hello, welcome to Hidden Existence. I'm so sorry about the delay, but we're here now and back from episode, I can't remember now, but it was a few weeks ago. We've got Dave Hodrien back from the Birmingham UFO group. How are you doing, Dave?
Very good, thank you. Lovely to be back.
You were on and we went through quite a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Fascinating stuff, and you've come back tonight. We're going to talk about military witnesses, types of aircraft, and UFO influences in music, TV, films, and stuff like that. I'll let you start where you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, it's very good to be back. I mean, in part one, we were discussing various aspects of the contact phenomena, alien abductions, and alien visitations, which is something I've got a particular interest in. I've looked at many, hundreds of cases now around the world over the last 12 years directly on that. Towards the end of the last session, we did mention there was a particular case. I don't know if you remembered it, if we actually mentioned it here on the show or not, but there was a case from Droitwich that I've spoken of before various times. It's a very, very impressive case. And it's particularly interesting because it's got a video in it, video footage that may potentially show an actual abduction taking place on camera. So for that reason alone, it makes it pretty fascinating. But it's also a very impressive case.
How come it was being videoed? Was it something going on before, or? Yeah,
essentially. I mean, I'd have to go into two of these sort of key experiences. I can take you through with that. Essentially. I was passed the case from another ufologist because he knew I had a big interest in contact, and I sometimes get contact cases passed through to me to investigate further. And towards the end of 2010, the lady involved, she had two very, very interesting contact cases. They were back to back, about 5 or 6 days apart from one another. Now she'd had experiences going back through her entire life. But what happens with contacts a lot of the time is the experiences are so unusual for people, they put them to the back of their mind and just go about their daily life and try to forget that these things have happened. And it might be just little odd experiences, or it might be sort of more in-depth stuff. But what happened with these two experiences, they're known as a trigger experience. It's basically where something so amazing, so incredible happens that you can not really deny it anymore, and you know that something's gone on with it. And then often you'll start sort of looking back through your life and seeing other things that are sometimes related. And it turned out that her and other members of her family had contact since sort of most of their lives. But what happened with these? Do you want me to go into details of what happened with this? It was quite a fascinating one. Yeah. So the first. So she had no clue on the UFO subject. She hadn't read about contact or anything like that. And what happened was the night that it happened, she was finding it hard to get to sleep, and her husband had dropped off to sleep. And she went through to check her daughters to see if they were okay, see if they were still awake or sleeping soundly. And they were fast asleep. But she happened to glance out the window, and the house where they lived is on the outskirts of Droitwich, and they've got farmers' fields all around. And in the distance, she saw what appeared to be an orange, glowing, oval-shaped object over by some trees in the distance. I think I've got some. I may have sent you some images to bring up, showing the location, and also a quick sketch by herself of the object. So she's looking at this, and at first she thought it was a plane that was going to crash, but it was moving too slowly. So she was wondering what it was. There you go. That's pointing out the location where she saw. She saw this light in the distance over the trees. She glanced away, and when she looked back, the thing had jumped, and it was no longer in the distance. It was now about 100 yards from the house, and it was much lower down over the field. At least you assume it's the same object. I mean, stands to reason it was. And what it looked like was a very, very bright, glowing bank of lights. There was some object behind it, but it was so bright that she couldn't see it. It was now quite close. And in that situation, usually, I mean, imagine what you'd do in that situation. You'd probably wake up your family, you'd be showing them, you might call the police, you might call the MOD, you might run out of the house and run off screaming down the road. She didn't do any of those things. Instead, she accepts it as normality and just goes back to bed. And this is an aspect. I think I might have touched on this in our last interview, where people, when they experience contact, they don't usually act in a normal manner. It's kind of like it's altered state of reality, and that's one of the reasons why people don't tend to capture abductions and things on camera, because they accept it as something completely normal to them. And that's often the reason why they won't ask lots of questions. People say, okay, you met alien beings. Why didn't you ask them hundreds and hundreds of questions? And afterwards, they'll be like, I didn't think of it at the time. I just accepted what was happening. So she way back down. She lay back down, and she was there for a period of time. So she's on a bed. So you think, okay, maybe it's all a dream, But there's a lot of aspects that point towards this being something way more than just a dream. So all of a sudden, she's in this kind of darkened location, no longer in a room, and her eldest daughter is up by her shoulder, and she leans into her and says, "It's your turn next, Mum. Don't worry, they won't hurt you." And she doesn't know what that means, but she feels this kind of rushing sensation, almost like passing through a tunnel. And then she's in this other space. It's really odd. She was lying down. She believed she was naked. She was floating, essentially, in a lying down position. And all around her were what appeared to be glowing yellow laser lines all around her in squares everywhere. All directions. Now, she was also paralyzed. This is quite common with contact. Most people in an abduction scenario won't be able to move much. And she was pretty much fully paralyzed. But she could look around with her eyes and move her head a tiny bit. But she couldn't have a proper look around her whole surroundings. She could just see these glowing lines. She did feel the presence of these smaller beings on either side of her. She couldn't see them, but she knew there were multiple creatures there, short things like children height. And there was also a taller being that was up here around behind the shoulder. And say, how does she know that? She just sensed it. It was there. And at one point she started to panic because of the situation, how weird it was. And the being, the one behind her put its hand on her head. She feels its hand on her head, and a sense of calm goes through her. Quite often the beings in these abduction scenarios will calm the individual right down. Sometimes they'll stare into their eyes with their big black eyes, if it's the greys. Or they'll sometimes talk with them.
Do they ever smell anything?
Yes.
Or they do?
Yeah, sometimes there's a smell of kind of sulfur,
Right.
sort of quite sort of noxious type smell. They can also sometimes sort of feel warmth or sort of humidity, but a lot of the time it feels a lot more neutral. No smells and no particular temperature, just a standard sort of room temperature. Okay. So it does vary. So she felt these beings, and they started to touch her. The little ones, they were basically going down the side of her body, touching her with their fingers. She could feel them doing that, and she was scared they were going to hurt her back because she had a bad back at the time. And she got this telepathic message inside her head saying, "Don't worry, we won't hurt your back." So it was like they could hear her thoughts and were responding to a query. And after this examination, this doorway opens in the distance. So she's in this darkened area. All of a sudden, there's this rectangular doorway with a white light behind it. And standing in the doorway is her son. Now, her son was quite a tall guy. I met him when I went around to the house to investigate the case. He was about 7 foot high. And he was just there on the craft. She was like, what's he doing there in this situation? He was just standing there. Didn't speak with her or anything. He was just there in the doorway. She senses this sense of urgency with the little guys. You can hear them chattering. She can't get any proper words from them, but there's this sense of urgency, and all of a sudden the experience ends and she finds herself back in her bed. She's lying there, she's awake. She's like, what on earth just happened? Wakes her husband up, tells him what's going on, and he's really quite disturbed by what's happened. It felt a lot more vivid to her than a normal nightmare would, and he just thinks she's had a bad dream, go back off to sleep and that sort of thing. So in the end she settles back down, but she can't let this rest. In the morning she checks her belly, and there's a couple of bruise marks around her abdomen that weren't there before. And in the days following that, she starts to get a real fear of going to sleep in the bedroom where this happened. This is very, very common with contact. So if somebody gets taken from a particular location, stands to reason they're remembering what's happened to them, sometimes subconsciously. But she had some recollection of what happened there, and she's very disturbed to go back to sleep. And she's finding it very, very difficult, and it's starting to build up each day. So after a few days, her husband he kind of had enough. Now, it turned out that he worked on security cameras, infrared cameras for houses, put them together for a job, and they had a number of them kicking around the house. So he says to her, okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll set up a camera in the bedroom, and we'll set it recording every single night when we go to sleep. Because nothing will happen to you if you're being watched. So basically just to put her mind at ease, and it does kind of work. So they put the camera there, and she does feel more at ease and everything, and thinks it's not going to happen if I'm being recorded or whatever. And they leave the camera running about 3 days after they've been doing this. So every morning they wake up and they know nothing's happened in the night, at least to her knowledge. So they just wipe the footage and just carry on. So they don't sit there every day going through hours and hours of footage and so on. So a few days after this, she has this second experience. It's another very, very odd experience. Now, in this one, she finds herself in a completely different location. And there's none of the thing with her daughter or anything. She's just in this odd location. She's lying down on this bench-like table. She's again naked, but she's got a kind of thin sheet over her. And there's it looks almost like a doctor's office to her. There's kind of wood paneling, and there's a double doorway leading out somewhere. Now, I mentioned in our last chat about screen memories and how these beings can mask the appearance of not only themselves, but also their surroundings. And it's my belief that this was happening with this experience. So right next to her is this little doctor guy. It's about child height. It's about 4'5". He's got spectacles on. He's got short red hair. He's wearing a sort of normal doctor's white coat. And she's thinking, who's this little chap? And he puts his hands over her. He doesn't touch her. He holds his hands a couple of inches above her, and he starts moving down her, doing some sort of body scan. And he starts telling her things, ailments that she's had at various times. He had an accident in the past, they bruised there. He had a stomach ulcer, but it's healed up, this sort of thing. And she's really scared he's going to tell her something bad, like she's got cancer or something, but he doesn't say that at all to her or anything. He actually tells her that she doesn't have that, again, in response to her. And she can sense the tall one's there again. She can't see it, but she can sense it's there behind her again. And so it's a kind of direct link.
Is he physically talking to her in this? Is she, or she's...
It's always through the mind. But
Yeah.
So he does say actual words to her. Yeah, he tells her she does not have cancer. So so she hears actual voices in English in her mind in response to her thought. So she doesn't say anything out loud to him, but he responds to it. So after this kind of scan that goes on a bit, all of a sudden, bang, it ends, and she's back into bed again. Again, wakes up her husband. Well, the family, they were Muslim, and her husband believed that what was going on was a jinn. So jinn, also known as a genie. That's the English kind of wording for it. And essentially, through speaking with the family, so I didn't know too much about what jinns were or weren't, but in talking with them, it sounded a lot like poltergeists. So they'd kind of start fires, move objects around, kind of mischievous spirits. And that's what her husband believed this was, that was causing these odd encounters. But she didn't believe that. She thought this is just way off to that. And she didn't know anything about contact or anything, but at that point, she looked into it later on after I'd sort of spoken with them in depth. But what they did do, they had the camera footage, of course. So obviously she's like, well, something happened in the night. I don't know when it happened, but something was definitely going on. So let's check back the footage, shall we? And so they start watching back this footage, and they're sitting there, and they can see himself lying down in bed, and they're just fast forwarding it through bits, and they're just lying there, occasionally moving around a little bit. And it gets to about 3:33 in the morning, just going to 3:34. It's interesting, the 3:33 thing. You could say coincidence, but there is this numeracy synchronicity that occurs with cases sometimes, with the same numbers coming up again. Yeah, but it can sometimes be confirmation bias and nothing more. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily mean that was a thing. But anyway, it just turns to 3:34, and something odd starts happening on the footage. She kind of starts doing this back. It's like a back is arcing up under the bed. You can see her and her husband lying there, and all of a sudden the sheets are kind of sort of coming right up, and then it just folds inwards and just goes just completely flat to a ridiculous level. I think you've probably got some photos that I sent. There you go. You can see 3:33. Right, 3:33 in the morning, 44 seconds. Okay. Yeah. And sorry, it was the end of 2010. There we go. And yeah, that's right. That's what I said, wasn't it? That's the lady there, lying in bed. To the left, in the semi-darkness, is her husband. You can't really see him there, and that's her bedroom. Obviously, we went around and saw the house and everything. So they're just lying in bed. So that's how the footage starts. And then if you go to the next image, there we go. Yeah, so the sheet starts kind of coming up on her side. It almost, when you see the video, which is inside the case report, a back starts kind of doing it looks possibly like a back. I don't know, might be a front. I don't know, but it starts arcing up to a ridiculous level, as you can see.
Yeah.
And then it just goes in. Yeah. So now you see it's 3:34, 20 seconds. Yeah. And that's it after it's dropped. Yeah. So it just folds in on itself, and it just looks ridiculous. Like it just looks like she's dematerialized from the bed. That's exactly what it looks like. Yeah. So
that's
there's
her
no movement there.
That's her in the bed.
Yep.
That's
yeah.
Wow.
So it doesn't move for about 14 minutes, about 13 or 14 minutes, and they actually fast forward the video to see what's going on here. Yeah, and there's no movement at all there. So I analysed it and everything. Couldn't see any movement. There's a tiny bit of movement about 1 second after it drops, but it could easily be the sheet folding in on itself. It's inconclusive. After about 14 minutes, all of a sudden, the sheets kind of go up like that, and they go up this ridiculous height like that. And when they settle back down, she's back in the bed. Okay, there she is. That's her back. Yeah. So that's her husband who's rolled over. So it's his legs there. He's just been disturbed by the movement next to him, or whatever. Doesn't wake up, and she doesn't wake up. Yeah, and
she's on her side. I've got you now. She's on her side there, facing out.
That's right. Yeah.
Facing out to the right. Got you now. Yeah, not flat on her back. Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah. Just from that one, they look like they're both back to back there. But
her husband's rolled over to face her, so she's facing outwards, and her husband's rolled inwards. He's now facing towards the centre of the bed.
Yeah, right.
You see on the video, you see him like sort of stir in his sleep and roll over.
Yeah, got you now. That is fascinating.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you see the footage, I mean, it's impressed quite a lot of people. Now, the thing is, it did go out online. Lady spoke to another ufologist originally with this and everything, and he tried to use it to gain some notoriety or whatever against her wishes, which is a shame. There's people out there who'll just, they'll just get hold of information and they'll just use it for their own benefit, their own gains, which is just lame and just shouldn't be done at all. So basically, in the video, a lot of people started putting, that's camera tricks. Yeah, because what do you see when you see a video like that? Yeah, there's all sorts of videos online of people claiming to be abducted, this sort of thing. Yeah, well, what I can tell you, is that video is not a hoax video. Okay, and I know this because the family were deeply traumatized by what was happening. Yeah. There was no way that they'd set that up for a hoax at all. She was really upset about these experiences that had happened. They'd properly given a lasting trauma. And she just wanted answers, so there's no way that's a hoax. Now, what it is one or two things. She's either dematerializing from the bed, or she's moving around in such an odd way, and it's created an optical illusion, making her look like she's dematerialized from the bed. So that would be the obvious kind of skeptical approach to that video. There's a couple of problems with that. Okay, so first of all, I mentioned her bad back. She said to me, if I'd have moved, if I'd have changed position, I would have jumped up in pain. And she said that when she moved in a bed and everything, she'd do that. She'd leap up out of the bed in pain. And that didn't happen, obviously. She had no recollection, till the morning. Then she obviously remembered the incident, but not this, what happened on the footage. Now, also, the length of the footage does tend to match her experience. So it's not like her experience lasted for 1 minute. It's not like her experience lasted for several hours and she had a good walk around the spaceship or anything like that. It seemed to last about the same sort of period as the experience that she was recounting. So that's an interesting one. But above all, she actually sent it to an American crew who worked on a program called Fact or Fate, which you may have seen. It's a program where they tried to prove or disprove paranormal videos, all sorts of things, ghosts, Bigfoot, everything, UFOs, the whole lot. It's all in there. And they'll look at these videos and they'll either prove or disprove them or leave them unknown. Now, her video was on one of those programs because she sent it across for them to be included to have a look at, and they couldn't disprove it. And a proper camera crew could not recreate the video without using camera trickery or like hydraulics inside the bed or whatever. And I assure you she didn't do that with that video. So what are you left with? Weighing up the pros and cons, I certainly believe she was abducted. I believe that the two incidents were abductions. Incidentally, I mentioned her son in the first experience aboard the craft in the doorway. We hypnotically regressed the lady I work with a hypnotherapist sometimes for contact cases, and hypnotic regression is one of the ways that you can recount lost memories. And sometimes if the witness wants to go down that route, we do that with her. Now, she had quite a lot of conscious recollection of the experience already, and that all came out exactly the same. Yeah, so there was no deviation, but there were certain gaps and changes. Yeah, and one of the changes was her son, and it wasn't her son anymore. What she recounted under regression was a very tall, thin grey, about 8 foot high. So it was basically putting on a screen memory of her son. So and her son was very tall, so that's why it used that as a screen memory, I assume. So she saw it as a hunt, but it was actually this grey being. Because sometimes the greys aren't always childlike. A lot of the time they're sort of 3 or 4 foot high, but sometimes they can be very, very tall and thin. And sometimes you can get both types. So you can get the sort of tall ones overwatching the back of the room or something, and then the little ones will be, performing activities. So it's quite interesting, almost like they're kind of overseeing it. Different, maybe hierarchy. Don't know. Numerous.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? What position do they hold? I mean, like you say, the taller ones are looking out. Is the more intelligent ones? Is the less intelligent ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly. You get cases where they feel like almost autonomous. That might be because they don't really talk much. They're quite cryptic and they don't really say that much to people. So they've got a kind of cold, unnatural, unemotional kind of feeling to them. Some people believe that they are, in fact, created maybe by another species to do sort of like worker bees. So they, they're not and they don't have a belly button, and they don't have genitalia. So you have to say, well, how are they reproduce? If they're a species, how are they reproducing? So that's interesting. So maybe they have been created by another species to do work. Maybe one of the other types that are seen. But I couldn't say for definite on that.
No. It's fascinating. What else did she remember from being regressed?
Well, the little doctor guy. When we asked her to describe this little doctor chap, and what she said was his face looks like it wants to fall off. That's what she said. Right. And what that was her seeing past the mask, the screen memory that this being was putting on. It was a grey, putting on a screen memory of this little doctor guy, and she was seeing past it. Under regression, that's why she said that. Then we asked her to describe the hands, and she said the hands they look human. And then she said, no, they don't. She said the fingers are too long and too thin pointed fingers. That's what she said. So it was like under regression, her mind was breaking past this barrier that they put up, this blocker blocking their true appearance. And it's very likely that the surroundings was also screen memory, because it looked very much like a sort of human-made office with sort of wood paneling and wall and doors and things. So that was interesting. We regressed to about those experiences. There were later dates where we looked into other experiences from her past. I may have mentioned last time the link with the psychic abilities with contact, how a lot of contactees appear to possess one or more psychic type abilities. Quite often they'll have premonitions of future events. Involuntary, or can sense emotions through people and just sort of highly attuned to people's emotions. Now, the lady from this case, she in her childhood, she recounted numerous times. She used to play a game where she'd guess the drawing of an animal that her father would draw a picture of a random animal, and she'd tell him what it was. She knew what he was drawing on a piece of paper from a distance. So that was interesting. She'd also had premonitions. And she also recounted an experience from a childhood where her and a younger brother, actually left the house where they lived in the middle of the night, went to a farmer's field, and there was a massive disc above them, and I assume they were both taken aboard that. She didn't have any recollection of it, but she remembers getting home afterwards and traipsing in mud, and her mum telling her off for getting mud on the carpet, which she'd brought in from outside from walking around barefoot. Right. So you get these aspects that show up from time to time in these cases, physical proof that backs up that it's more than just a dream. Yeah. And
so she's been experiencing stuff all her life, basically. Maybe this sort of stuff. Yeah. The same thing.
Yeah. But she'd kind of blocked it out, she'd just put it to one side. because she wanted to just get on with her life, and she did. And it was only after she started looking into contact that she saw the pieces fit together, and she was like, "Yeah, this is clearly what's going on."
I wonder if the mask is a lot different for the kids. I wonder if it's an entirely different experience, because maybe they think children. I mean, have you ever interviewed children that have experienced anything like this as children?
Had to be very careful, obviously, because you don't want to kind of scare the child or anything like that, So it's I'm always very cautious with it. But I have been in a number of cases, and they'll often appear as animals to children. So they'll appear in the form of an owl or a wolf, other animal, a dog, that sort of thing. And sometimes they'll appear as something familiar to the child, like that, maybe their own pet, things like that. But owls seem particularly common, which is interesting. If you think about an owl's face and how close it looks to a grey's face with the white feathers and the black eyes, maybe that's where that comes from.
Wow.
But yeah, it's quite well known that happens more in childhood, and then as they get older, I've dealt with some repeat cases where, as a child, they'll appear to them with a screen memory on, and then later on they get to a certain age, or adulthood or whatever, and then the beings will appear at how they actually look. It's almost like they understand that the person is going to be able to deal with that better. At least that's how I'd potentially interpret that. A level of trust or a level of familiarity is built up with the person, and they're going to be sort of more okay with it. They've got more used to it in their life. If
there's beings, putting a hand on a head saying it's okay, don't worry, they're obviously aware of people being scared and that sort of thing. So it makes sense with children. It will be a kind of contact.
But you have to say with that, is that for their benefit? Right. So there's been cases where people have punched greys or have got up and started panicking and running around the craft and that sort of thing when it's happening, and that's why they usually shut people down. So, but there's some cases where people have come out. The Travis Walton case is a particular example of an absolutely amazingly famous case from Snowflake, Arizona, 1975. Now, in that he woke up, and the way that the beings acted, it was almost like he wasn't supposed to have, and he come out of this. And he wasn't supposed to see any of it, and he woke up and he actually lashed out at them. He grabbed one of the instruments I assume that they were going to use on him in that abduction, and actually hit one of them on the arm with it. And the greys, 3 of them, sort of backed off to the door and just stood there watching him. And then all of a sudden kind of exited the room, just left him lying there on this bench. And he got up and started wandering around and started exploring the craft, and went into a number of rooms. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, his story is incredible.
They wouldn't want that to happen, obviously, they wouldn't want people running around, if that wasn't what they were there to do. So it makes sense that they would shut them down. But then I've dealt with some cases where they're not shut down. But usually those cases, they've built up a sort of level of trust with the person. And you can see how it works. You can see the repeat cases. You can see that in the cases where people are having proper deep discussions with them, and it's almost like they've built up a level of trust, and they know they're not going to panic or try and attack them or anything, and then they'll allow them to move. And there's other cases where they'll allow somebody to move a bit and go and see something, and then they'll kind of pull them back, and they'll feel themselves being pulled back onto the bench, and then before they know it, they're lying down again and unable to move again. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it's like they're priming them up, aren't they? They're priming them up, but how far does it go? Yeah. How far do these experiences go? Beyond being experimented on, what else happens to people?
Quite often people get sort of visions of seemingly future events. They'll sometimes be shown them on an actual physical screen, so they'll take them to a screen aboard the craft and show them it, and they'll see pictures of it on the screen. And other times it's directly implanted and information download, as known as, and they'll see visions in their mind. And what they see is forest fires, bombs exploding, people dying, maybe Armageddon. It seems that they are trying to warn us. Perhaps they care about us as a species, and they don't want us to destroy ourselves. But then you could look at that both ways again. You could look at that in a nice way, and they care for us, how nice of them. Or maybe they're harvesting material from us, and they don't want that to stop, so they they're worried that we're going to destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
But there's also this interest with nuclear weapons, and that's an interesting other aspect of the subject that seems to feed into that. Is this is sort of environmental warnings, and they're either concerned that we're going to start reaching out with these nukes and attacking them with them, or that we're going to destroy ourselves with them. It's too much power for us to handle.
It's there's so many things, isn't there? Who knows?
You can take one aspect, one particular agenda, and you can sit and delve into it, and you can see case after case where it appears. It's a very, very detailed, complex subject. A lot of people out there who see it on TV programs and things, they think, oh, it's just an abduction, like that's it, like they get taken up, they do some experiments on them, fool around with them, and then they put them back down again. It goes way beyond that. It really does. And they seem to select certain people to have sort of deep, meaningful communication with, where they'll probably have in-depth chats with them, even showing them how to fly their craft or how the energy systems in their craft work, this sort of thing. And then other people they won't say a word to, and they'll act very, very cryptic. Or the person might be calling out for help, and they might just say sort of one word to them, that sort of thing, and they'll ask them who they are, and they won't answer. It's very interesting the way that they act differently with different individuals. Yeah.
And so, for all the cases that you're hearing, I mean, they sound like the good in terms of they haven't hurt. I know it's a terrifying experience, but
yes.
There's bad ones out there, isn't there? And if there's bad ones out there, maybe people wouldn't be coming back. I mean, what's the other side to it? Have you heard?
Yeah, so, well, the thing is, if somebody goes missing, somebody's gone missing, and you don't know whether that's anything at all. There are very, very few cases on record where somebody's been abducted knowingly and then has never been found again.
Yeah,
there are a few cases from back in the 1950s where the military sent objects to intercept these things, and they've got near to them, and the electronics on the plane have just gone completely haywire, and it's crashed. And when they've gone and found the plane, there's no pilot in the pilot seat.
Wow.
Never to be seen again. Potentially abducted from the aircraft onto the UFO. I say onto the UFO, onto this craft.
Yeah.
So you could say maybe they saved them. Maybe they're now living on somewhere else. Maybe they're living aboard the craft. Maybe not. Maybe they dematerialize them. Who knows? But there are very few cases where they've acted aggressively to people. Yeah. So I think if they had malevolent intent, we'd see a lot more cases like that. There are very, very few cases. There are some cases that talk about Greys fighting back and battles against them and this sort of thing. But most of the time, in most cases, they act very, very defensively. And if we try to intercept them, if we're intercepting them, surely it's their right to fight out, to defend themselves and shoot the plane down if we're attacking them or purposely getting close to them. But they don't do that. They'll time and time again, they'll just be off. They'll just zip away. Yeah,
they seem to have the power, don't they? Just to disappear or whatever.
Well, they're probably treating us like an annoying fly buzzing around. They're like, oh, there they are again. Let's get out of here. And off they go. That's been recorded on radar again and again. I mean, this is, the physical evidence for this is dramatic. It's why I believe this is going on. If you look at this, if you look at one particular part, you're like, okay, there's some evidence there. It's not all. But if you look at it back to back and you start looking at it and fitting in the gaps, you'll see the amount of evidence is incredible. There are cases on record where they've recorded radar of objects moving. They've seen them, so the pilot's got a visual. There's something there, like a glowing object or a disc, and then they've got it on radar as well. Yeah. Now there's some cases where they've got it on multiple radars. So there's cases where they've even checked the radar and they've gone to another. So you think, okay, it's a radar malfunction and then a hallucination or whatever you want to call it. So they've gone and checked a second radar station. The second radar station can also see it on radar. Wow. So how do you how can you deny a case like that? Multiple radar stations. There's something physically there. They're getting it on radar, and there's a visual representation. And then all of a sudden, the object's gone from 1,000 feet to 20,000 feet in several seconds. How can anybody not fail to see that as impressive?
Yeah.
I would say that those cases are the ones that give us a view to the capabilities of these objects, which is quite incredible.
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
dealing with something that's way beyond our own technology level. I know that people say it could be a secret project, that they're working on things and things are way ahead. Yes, but things are way ahead. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, there's black projects going on. Yeah, the stealth bomber, for example, was made in the 50s, and it wasn't released till much later. So they're way ahead. Believe me, behind the scenes, they're working on things that are way ahead of what our currently military is showing. However, these objects, are light years ahead. No pun intended.
Yeah.
They perform maneuvers that would kill human pilots. They can shoot along at thousands of miles an hour and suddenly stop on a dot and just stop still, and then hover motionlessly, either completely silently or with a low hum in some cases, and then all of a sudden shoot straight up vertical. They can blink in and out of existence. Yeah, in a clear sky, they can appear without any clouds or anything. They can appear and disappear at will. They're either using some sort of advanced cloaking and they're still there. And there are cases that back that up. There's an incredible case where a craft actually landed on a naval battleship, and it actually landed on the ship, and they couldn't see it, but it was weighing down the ship. The ship was weighed down, and it was actually sitting there. And they knew an object was there, but they couldn't see it. And it was there for a number of minutes, and then it took off again, and the ship righted itself. So it was actually weighing down the ship, but they couldn't see it. So we have evidence in certain cases that they can do this cloaking. Maybe not all craft, certain craft types can. But then there's also evidence to suggest that maybe they're completely removing themselves from our reality, entering a different dimension of reality. So, literally nipping out of our existence.
Yeah.
Which it sounds wild. I mean, I know some of this stuff sounds really wild, but when you look at the cases, it's what it points towards.
Yeah. Definitely. You can, if you think of frequencies, I've said it before, like radio stations, they're all there. You might only be tuned into one, but it doesn't mean say that the other ones are not. That's still there, and that's how easy it is, isn't it, to turn the dial and you're into another one.
And some people feel that's what they are, because if you think that if you go down that route of being extra dimensional, that completely removes the problem with the vast distances of space. So a lot of the time, people are skeptical of the extraterrestrial hypothesis because we know how ridiculously far it is to other stars. Now, how I see it is that's with our current technology and current understanding of science. And if these creatures, these species, are thousands or millions of years ahead of us in evolution, which they may well be, they may be using completely different methods of travel that we can't even comprehend. They may be instantly teleporting here to Earth, not traveling so that we could see awake through space or we could see the objects literally flying here. They just go off there and then they're here on Earth. Sounds impossible. Sounds impossible now in 2020. Who knows how it's going to sound next year? Yeah, exactly. Science changes all the time, through its understanding. So I'd say it would be very narrow-minded to believe that we're there with our scientific discoveries, and that there aren't incredible things that we've yet to discover. And one of those things could be vast travel from vast distances via a completely different method, not burning fuel. It's definitely possible and possibly out there already. Technology, like you say, we don't know, do we? What they've already got, what we've already got. I used to say these things don't. There's no one in these things, that they send these things out like watchers again. These monitoring ships. I mean, you see them doing those formations. I mean, our normal planes are not doing stuff like that, but they're meeting up, they're going in circles, they're going out, they're coming back in. What do you think that's about, the formation stuff? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, our jets fly around in formations from time to time, so where they're doing group activities. And I mean, that kind of leads nicely onto a fascinating case. Actually, one of the oldest cases I've investigated, this one. It goes right back to August of 1974. And this is it's particularly impressive for a number of reasons, this one. It's not only is it first a formation, but also I had independent collaboration from 3 different groups of witnesses from different locations. and it was also known by one of those groups that there'd been other sightings of it. So what happened with this? The initial case report, I believe it was quite early in my investigation years, actually, about 2010, I think. And I got contacted by a gentleman from Castle Vale in Birmingham, and he wanted to talk about an experience that had happened to him many, many years before, back in early August 1974. And what happened? There was 3 witnesses in this case: him, a friend, and his friend's girlfriend. They'd just been out for the evening, and they were waiting for a bus. So just standing at the bus stop, waiting for the bus home. And they look up and they see a passenger jet, because it's quite close to Birmingham International Airport. So there's lots of flight paths going across Birmingham. They look up; it's a normal passenger jet flying over. But then, shortly following behind the jet, they see these 2 small blue-white coloured orbs, and they're following along side by side that, and they're going along behind the jet. And they're looking up, and they're like, "What's that?" And they're clocking these things. And they're moving along behind the jet. All of a sudden, these 2 things just shoot off different directions. One goes east, one goes west. Bang! That, and they just zip off, and they're gone. Incredible. Like I say, the capabilities of these things is extreme. Oh. So they were clearly following the plane and then decided to stop. About a minute goes by, and all of a sudden they see what appears to be a V-shaped formation of anywhere between sort of 7 to 11 objects, I think it said. He doesn't remember the exact number, but there was a lot of them. V-shaped formation of these. They were oval-shaped. They were white pearlescent in colour. Oh, there we go. That's the drawing you did for the report. So oval or egg-shaped, white pearlescent, sort of seemed to be kind of semi-luminous from inside, or maybe reflecting the glow from the city. But either way, you could see these shaped clearly enough to know that they were not aircraft and they were not geese. What happened with these things is they flew across from horizon to horizon in about a minute. So these things were going pretty darn fast. And I watched them just go across the sky on a straight path and vanish eastward. So they headed off to the east, and that was that. So what happened was I wrote up the case report. It's really good when I hear a historical case. I really like that. I'm not only getting cases from modern day, but also stuff that's gone on in the past, but it's never been recorded. Now, this was one of these rare occasions where my case report actually prompted a new witness to come forward. This is brilliant. So I put the case report up on the BUFOG website, and 1 year goes by approximately, and I get contacted by a lovely chap named Gary. Sadly now deceased. He used to come down to the group regularly, but he said he'd seen my report on the website, and he believed he'd seen the same things. But his sighting occurred in Solihull, so about 5 miles south of Birmingham now. And what happened was he was about 9 years old at the time, and he was playing on a place called Camden Green. I think I sent you a photo of the green. He's playing cricket. There it is. It's Camden Green. Lovely place. And they were all out there playing cricket on the green. And all of a sudden, one of his friends shouts out, "What the F's that?" And they look up, and these objects are incoming. Exactly that. He said he saw a V-shaped, oval-shaped objects, and they came in flying across the skylight. It was a night sky by that time. It was very late evening, and the sun had started to go down, so you could see other stars. And they went in, and then they changed course and went off on a sort of slightly different path. But as they started to go away into the distance, they all of a sudden they stopped. And then he said the central object of them started to do this vibrating-y kind of wobbling movement, and then it just shot straight upwards. And then a second later, the other ones also go up after it, almost following it, follow the leader. And they completely vanish. So obviously when they saw it do that, they were like, okay, this clearly wasn't any normal aircraft of any kind. So that was his sighting, and absolutely believed him. You know, he was like, yeah, I remember this from when I was a kid. It wasn't like, oh, I've read the report, I'm going to make up that I saw this. He took me to the location and everything, went through it in great detail. I've got no reason at all to not to trust that was real. And as I said, I mean, it changed his opinion of the UFO subject forever after his life. And when he found out the group existed, he started coming to our meetings and everything. Lovely guy. Do miss him. So the third sighting came in a couple of years after that. Yeah, so it's now about sort of 2013 sort of time. And what happened was I got a call from somebody who wanted to report a sighting from up in Liverpool. Now, what they said was the sighting occurred in August 1973. And I was like, what does that date and month and year sound familiar to me? And I went back checking through the case reports. I was like, oh yeah, and what he claims to have seen was 5 glowing, sort of slightly glowing disc-shaped objects, and he's seen them directly overhead. And initially, they were in the shape of a 5-sided of a dice. So there's 4 with a central one. But then the central one, he said, moved forward, making more like a V shape. There we go. So that's what he saw. And then he said it hovered there for about 30 seconds silently. And then all of a sudden, what do you know? They shoot straight up vertical, exactly like Gary had reported from the Solihull case. So even though he got the year wrong, obviously you're thinking back decades. So I was like, I said to him, could it have been 1974? Instead, he said, absolutely. He said he might have got the year wrong. So I was like, yeah, it's got to be the same thing. So the guys from Castle Vale, the initial witnesses from Castle Vale, they, after it happened, they contacted Birmingham Airport and they tried to find out. And Birmingham Airport said they hadn't got anything on radar. But then, who knows? They might have been just not told them. But they then joined a UFO group, and in speaking with that UFO group, they found out that there'd been other cases seen up and down the UK, and apparently these objects performed a kind of S-shaped maneuver down the UK. They were seen as not right up in Manchester, Liverpool, like we got that sighting in, right down to Devon. So there were other cases that had been seen. I don't think the cases have ever been sort of brought together entirely. Those 3 cases that I investigated, I don't know who the other witnesses are. Obviously, I did a lot of research to see if I could track down any other witnesses online, but it's happened back in the 70s. Yeah. So back then, things weren't recorded on the internet as thoroughly as they are today. No. So there's probably files sitting out there, paper-based files sitting out there in drawers relating to this incident from other people that had seen it.
Yeah, exactly. Written logs that are now just collecting dust on some shelf somewhere.
But it's very interesting when you get multiple witnesses come forward like that, because it totally collaborates it. There's no to get that group of witnesses say they saw it, and then other people from a completely different location said they saw it as well. It's very, very strong evidence that it actually took place.
Yeah,
and you can't say that those several groups of witnesses would have all got the description of what it looked like incorrect. So maybe somebody sees it and they think, and it happens to be a flock of geese at high altitude reflecting the street lights. Yeah. But if several people are saying, no, these things were oval or disc shaped and were glowing and perform maneuvers like shoot straight upwards, you have to take that on board.
Yeah. Plus, you can hear geese, can't you? They make a right racket when they're.
That's true.
You hear them before you see them, don't you?
That is true. But there have been some UFO cases on record where birds is the most likely explanation. So it's one of the known IFOs, shall we say, identified flying objects.
Right, okay.
You have to be very, very careful. There's so many different things up there that people can misidentify as something advanced or the other craft. Because people often jump to conclusions, and you have to kind of take that on board before starting to look into more.
Perspective as well, isn't it? Perspective. If you've got no idea of sort of spatial awareness or anything like that, anything can look any side.
There are some weird things out there. I mean, have you do you know what a solar airship is, for example?
No.
No. Okay, so a solar airship is a massive, long balloon thing. Yeah, it's about 12 foot long, or sometimes longer. Huge, room-sized, house-sized, and they're usually black in color and they're cylindrical in shape. You can buy them. You can buy them for about £10 online. And what happens is you don't inflate them like a normal balloon. The air inside them, on a hot sunny day, you leave it outside. Obviously the black takes in the sunlight, heats up the air inside it, and it lifts up of its own due to the heated air inside it, because they're very lightweight. They drift up into the sky, and they look impressive. To anybody who doesn't know what one looks like, they can look incredible. I've had numerous cases where people have said, I've seen a cylindrical shaped craft with flashing lights down it, and I'm like, wow, that sounds amazing. And I got it on video too, and I checked the video, and it's one of these objects reflecting sunlight, so they're glinting lights on it. So they're saying they're electronic lights, and it's just reflections of sunlight on the thing. And sometimes they're tethered. So if it's tethered, it'll just stay put in one place. It'll hover, looking like it's under control and hovering motionlessly. sometimes the tether can break, or they can accidentally let it go like a kite, yeah, at which point it will do all sorts of things. So sometimes they can roll over and over. So I saw a video from Rowley Regis. You can have a look at that. It's on the Birmingham UFO group, our YouTube channel, and it's rolling like that. And the case report came in, cylindrical shaped craft performing rotation, spinning of its own accord, clearly under intelligent control. Right. Look at it. So solar airship drifting along in the wind, rolling over and over and over, again and again. So, and at a distance, that can look really impressive and really, really unusual. So that's just one example.
Isn't it? Yeah, exactly. There's so many things out there. A little bit like in the Bigfoot kind of that world where you can hear noises out there, but if you don't know a fox, there's 40 different calls. You'll never know. You might not know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly, and foxes sound absolutely hideous, don't they? So,
yeah.
Terrible.
I've got a quick question here while we're going along. Randy Gone Fishing is curious, but any underwater UFO stories you researched?
Yeah, very interesting one I had. This is really odd one. I had one that came in from a fisherman from down the Isle of Wight, just off the south coast near Portsmouth. And he'd been fishing out on some rocks. He used to go out in early mornings and fishing on the rocks down by the beach. And he claimed that one morning he went down. So he provided me with some detailed notes that he'd drawn up with the maps and everything. Again, I've got no reason to doubt these individuals. Why do that? Why fabricate? He wasn't trying to earn any money off it. But essentially what he said was, it was out there fishing and it was calm sea. And all of a sudden, up out of the water comes two magenta coloured pill-shaped objects. Yeah, they look like paracetamol pills. Sorry, I'm describing that wrong. Tic Tacs, that sort of shape. Yeah, rounded at each end. Yeah. They came up out of the sea. He estimated they were sort of at least a few meters in height, and they appeared to have kind of movement inside them, almost like eggs. You could see something moving through the outer layers of these things. So they popped up out of the water, saw the water raining down off them, floated across, and then just went back down into the sea in front of them. Wow. That's what he reported. Absolutely bizarre, yeah, and very, very unusual in numerous different ways. Not only the colour, but also what was happening there with the movement inside it. Really, really interesting. No reason to make that up at all. He provided me with the detailed maps. I can't prove it. I've just got his testimonial evidence to go on, but why say all that stuff to me? Yeah. He'd quite clearly written his own notes about what he'd seen, to remember it. I like that when witnesses provide me with something they've previously written. So, for example, I told you about the Glasgow case last time that we were talking about, and the drawing was from his past. He'd drawn that in his teenage years to remember what he'd seen from it. So it wasn't like I'd gone to him and say, draw the being or anything. He'd gone and already drawn it. So, long before he knew about my group or that we were going to write a case report on it. It was very interesting.
Yeah. So I think we might have, I just wanted to go back to the first case, the Droitwich, because there was some...
That's the bruises she got in her abdomen.
The bruises that she got, yeah. I just wanted to go through them before we carry on, and then and that was a description of the one she thought was the son.
Yeah, so under regression, that's what she saw, that's what she described. And as soon as she came out the regression, we asked her to draw it, and that's what she drew. So a very thin, tall grey with teardrop-shaped eyes. That's the craft up close.
Yeah,
that's the bank of lights. That is a little doctor guy. There is. Yeah, that's the sketch she did of that. So that's her line. She's just drawn herself as a stick figure. That's her line down on the bench because there's a sheet over her. She's drawn question marks at the top left. That's the tall being that was behind the soldier. She never saw it, so she's drawn question marks. Double doorway, as she could see off to her left, and there's the little doctor chap with his glasses on and his short hair. Yeah,
creepy.
It is there's a lot of creepy aspects of this subject. There really is.
Yeah. So where do you want to go next?
I've been recently investigating a case relating to the Phoenix Lights, which is stunning.
Right.
Absolutely stunning. So this is a case that we'll talk about media and all that. I need to tell you about this case. It's quite interesting. It's not yet a case report on the website, but it will be. This is current, essentially, and it involves a gentleman from Virginia. He grew up in Nottingham, but he now lives in Virginia in the USA. He's got a distinguished military background, working on a number of Air Force bases, aircraft maintenance and analysis. Very intelligent guy. He showed me evidence of his military background, and so he's a contactee essentially. He's had numerous experiences throughout his life involving number of UFO sightings and also contact type experiences when he was a child growing up in Nottingham. Started when he was about 4 to 6 years old. He remembers numerous encounters where a glowing white coloured orb would come outside his bedroom window at night time, and he'd run out of the room and run through to his parents' room, and the orb would follow, and then he'd see outside his parents' bedroom, and sometimes it sort of came into the house and things. He also has a number of experiences where he remembers running outside the house, and his parents put this down to sleepwalking. So they actually locked him inside his room after a period of time because they were scared of him getting up and wandering off down the street. But he has vivid recollections of being chased by this white orb on one particular occasion. He was running zigzags up the road where he lived, trying to get away from it, ducking down behind a neighbour's wall to avoid it. And at that point, he has a recollection of an abduction type memory where he found himself on it was a darkened room with a light coming down at a diagonal onto him, and there were greys standing around him, and he couldn't move. But at a certain point in the experience, he was able to move more, and he actually got up and started to run away from them around the room, like we were talking about earlier on. Oh. And then they kind of pulled him back he kind of felt himself being pulled back to the table that he was on. He never had direct communication with them, but it was definitely a contact type experience. So that has a direct link there with this white orb. But fascinatingly, in talking about his case, one of the things he alluded to was the fact that he was a witness to the Phoenix Lights. Now, the Phoenix Lights incident is one of the most impressive and massive UFO cases on record. It's from back in March 1997, 13th of March 1997. And many of your listeners will have heard of this case. Absolutely famous case, one of the most impressive cases ever. Essentially, a massive V-shaped object travelled over a couple of states in America. It was in the evening time, and what happened? The first sighting came in at the edge of the Nevada line between Nevada and Arizona. Mm-hmm. That was the first sighting of it. And it was V-shaped lights. Some of the witnesses reported just seeing lights. Other people reported seeing lights with a solid object between them blocking out the stars. So it was quite clearly one solid object. Although there were a number of confusing cases where they said they could see stars through it, and there's far more cases. Right. There's far more sightings where they said that it was definitely a single solid object. Oh. So anyway, they tracked it from the sightings that came in. They were able to track its course that it had moved, and it headed south. And then it flew right over Phoenix. That's Phoenix on. This is one of the maps I've created for the case report. So A is Phoenix. Down the bottom right, we've got Tucson. This is where it headed off to after it had flown over Phoenix, and hundreds of people saw it in Phoenix. There are a few photos and videos. Most people weren't ready for it. It was after dark, or they were too transfixed by what they were looking at because it was awe-inspiring. But it traveled over Phoenix slowly, and then it headed off southeast and went down towards Tucson. And the last known sighting, was at the edge of Tucson. Well, what happened was on that day, the witness, he and his wife were shopping in Phoenix. Now he was working on Walton Air Force Base close to Phoenix at the time. He was working there for a number of years, but on that week when the incident happened, he happened to have a week off, and he spent the week just relaxing. And on that day, on the day of the incident, he'd been out shopping in Phoenix, and they were on their way home and back down to Tucson where they were living while he was out there on the base. And halfway down Highway 10, which you saw on that map, he hears about it. They're listening to it on the radio. So there's the chatter on the radio about this object being seen by loads of people over Phoenix. Radio stations were alive with this, and people reporting it. This sort of thing. Police are getting in sightings. I mean, this was massive. They sent up military jets there were numerous jets who got sent up and actually saw it at a distance trying to approach it and things. Absolutely incredible case. Now, what happened was he stops the car because they're talking about it leaving Phoenix and heading south. So he's like, well, this thing's huge. I should be able to see it, surely. So it's very dark on the highway. So there were no street lights or anything. But he parked up at the edge of the road. He didn't see anybody else, not at least at that section where he was on. There were other vehicles going past, but nobody else stopped. And he got out and he's just staring there off to the north, to the left of the road. And it's pitch black. And he can't see much, but the stars are out. And he can just about make out sort of mountain line, low hills in the distance. And all of a sudden, he realizes that there's something there. It's a large, massive object blocking out the stars. And he can really see it. He can see some glints of light from towards the front. Now, you had to remember the angle he's looking at it. And he's drawn a picture. I think one of the pictures I sent you is his sketch of how it looked from his position. I got him to try to draw it. There we go. Okay, so imagine the black's covered in nighttime stars. Okay, so it's black on a black sky, very, very difficult to see. But you could see some glinting lights up near the front end, which are probably the lights on the underside of it. But remember, he's looking at it almost at a sideways on angle. But all he could see was this large, dark shape that was moving. And as it was moving, stars were blinking out as they went behind it and then reappearing. So it was obvious there was a large object there, traveling completely silently and slowly heading southeast.
Yeah.
And he watched it go past for about 5 minutes. Now, because of his military background, his wife was in the car, He didn't tell her about it. You probably think, why not? So he thought, this has to be ours. He thought this has to be some sort of top secret craft, human made. And he said that's got to be confidential. So due to his military background, he thought that what he was looking at, he wasn't supposed to see, and that somehow this was being seen by people and it was supposed to be secret. So he didn't tell his wife he'd seen anything. He just gets back in the car, told her he couldn't see anything, and they carry on their route home. I assume the object, he either went past it. It was off to the left. Don't forget, very, very dark. So it wasn't like, let's chase the UFO and follow where it goes or anything like that. It didn't do anything like that. He just carried on his way and just left it to it. But from what he went through exactly where he parked up and everything, and I've got no reason to doubt that whatsoever. Now you're probably thinking this is wild. He's had contact experiences as a child, seen numerous UFOs, and now he's also a witness to the Phoenix Lights. In those sort of cases, you have to be very, very careful. Because it sounds like what are the odds of that? So it seems with the Phoenix Lights, that it was just pure coincidence that he happened to be in the right place at the right time to be one of the witnesses. And don't forget, there were hundreds of witnesses to this thing. So, if it was one or two, that would make it even more suspicious. But due to him proving to me his military background and talking about the various Air Force bases he'd worked on over the years, I've got no reason to doubt that at all. And the detail that he's gone into with this, quite dramatic. And it's changed his life. He's fascinated by UFOs now, especially that incident, and he's been trying to find out. So in the days following it, he went back to ask on the base, ask around about it, and he found out then that it wasn't a top secret craft at all. Right. It wasn't a confidential craft. It was an unknown. It wasn't of Earth origin. The thing was far too ginormous. It was the size of several battleships alongside one another. It was huge. Wow.
Yeah. What's this? Another depiction? Is this an actual photo?
That's a depiction. That's a drawing. That's an art piece that somebody did in the paper. It's one of the most famous kind of drawings of what they reported it. Now, this thing, it was even seen by the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, who was in the town at the time. This is quite fascinating because he, in the days following it, lots of people who'd seen it were asking questions. What was it? What flew over Phoenix? We need answers. And he famously held a press conference where he said, I thought we've worked out what the answers are, we worked out. And he brought out somebody in a grey costume, and they all made a big joke of it and everything. And a lot of people were very deeply offended. They were like, we saw this with our own eyes, and you're taking the mick. Now, here's the amazing thing. Obviously, that goes down in history as one of the most, it was having a joke with people and everything. Years later, they track him down for this particular documentary, and he owns up to seeing it himself. And he says that he only did what he did to keep the peace while he was in power, while he was a governor. So years later, he admitted that he had been one of the witnesses. He'd seen it with his own eyes fly right over. And in his own words, he said he thinks it was an alien spacecraft. That's what he said. So the actual governor of the whole of Arizona saw it. So, and it was brilliant, this turnaround, you know, and it shows how people in power will say certain things and not necessarily mean them. You know, they'll say them because they're told to say them, or because they've got to say them to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Stop the questions.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's almost embarrassing, really, isn't it? There's so many people are seeing these things, these objects and stuff. And
Phoenix is unprecedented. Absolutely unprecedented. There's also a really interesting link with Kurt Russell, believe it or not.
Right.
So the actor Kurt Russell, he flies planes. And believe it or not, he was one of the first aircraft pilots to actually see the object at a distance from the air while he was landing at Phoenix Airport. And he came out with this on a TV interview. You can find videos of this online. And it sounds ridiculous again, but that's it. You know, it's life. You know, life is full of coincidences and things. And it's just coincidence, yeah? But the way he's talking about it, I've got no reason to doubt that that's real. You know, it didn't feel that he was just trying to get a bit of notoriety or link himself into UFOs for a particular reason or anything like that. He was talking straight up about it. He said he was just about to land.
I've just found
there you go, Kurt Russell. There we go, yeah. And this only came out in recent years, and the TV interviewer was like, "What?" And he was just coming out of the blue with this thing, you know, that he'd been one of his witnesses to one of the most massive, well-known UFO incidents ever. Just pure coincidence, sure.
Let me go back to some questions that have been asked, because I'll probably read them as time goes on. They kind of disappear off the thing. Nobody knows. 808. Dave, have you looked into those people who've had a foreign object removed from their bodies that aren't man-made or elements? This doctor removed 17 objects, and one implant was his own.
That's Dr. Roger Lear he's talking about, now sadly deceased. But there are other researchers as well who've done this, who've worked on this. So essentially, there's not many people do that in the UK who extract implants. I've worked on a number of contact cases that have involved implants. There's one particular case from Nuneaton, close to Birmingham, where the lady found one inside her left wrist, and you could see it. It was underneath her skin. It was a rounded, triangular-shaped object. It was metallic. They got a metal detector out. They showed me videos of them holding a metal detector against it and the metal detector going off. Yeah, whatever this thing was, she had a metallic object, and I felt it underneath her skin. I wanted to get an X-ray of it, and what happened with that is shortly before she'd found it, she had a vision of a reptilian's face in a bed. Just randomly came to her, and it terrified her. Yeah, right. She was a monster, and she was quite an artist, and she drew a very, very detailed pencil drawing of this face that you'd seen in her mind, and it terrified her. A few days later, she's out doing some gardening, and she bends down to grab something and feels it, and she was wearing one of those magnetic bracelets, you know, the ones that are made out of little ball bearings, and she thinks that pulled it to the surface of her skin, like it might have been down deeper inside her wrist. And then because of that, the magnet attracted it and brought it up to the surface or whatever. Whatever it was under there. Got no reason to think that wasn't an implant. Yeah, there was no entry wound. She doesn't remember damaging herself or anything. It was linked with this contact experience she'd had. I wanted to get it X-rayed. The next stage with an implant is to try and get an X-ray. Now, nobody really does X-rays for free in this country, but we were going to front that and sort that out. The thing is, it never got off the ground. For a while, she had other personal life things going on in her personal life, and I kept in touch a while. But after a while, it became obvious that she really wasn't that interested. I don't know whether it was still in her at that point or not. So we never did get that X-ray. But I probably would have led on to possibly an extraction. But extractions will cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Yeah, they're not going to you can't go to the hospital and say, I want you to take this thing out of my hand. They'll say, well, why is it causing you any bother? And you can be like, no. And they'll be like, well, go home then. They won't do that. You know, they just think it was a splinter or something. The doctor who she went to see, he said it was a bone fragment from when she was out doing the gardening, that she damaged her wrist somehow. and it was a fragment of bone had broken off. Yeah, but it was metal. It was metal because it set off metal detectors. So
metal's dangerous. Any metal in your body, same as glass, will travel.
Yeah,
especially if it's sharp. So if they're thinking it's just bone.
Yeah. There's been other cases where other contact cases where people have set off metal detectors. So they've gone off on their holiday, and the metal detector's gone off, and they've been like, "There's no metal on me," and so it was very likely that they had metal inside them, but they never found the object. It may have been taken out. It may still be in them. Sometimes people can carry them around for years and years and not even know they're there. It depends where they're placed. Sometimes they're placed at the bridge of their nose, and sometimes when they're put there, the individual actually have recollection of having this metallic instrument shoved up their nose and this kind of crunch sound. Sorry. And they'll sometimes get nosebleeds and things because it can lead to repeated nosebleeds. And sometimes in these nosebleeds, the object can actually fall out. So they'll find a small metallic thing, but they won't know what it is. So unless they know what that is, they won't keep hold of it and be like, "Oh, it's an implant." They'll just chuck it away. Just think, "What's that? A splinter or whatever." And that's happened in a number of cases as well. So it's certainly a very real part of contact.
Yeah, I saw someone. I've got a feeling it was Richard Hall. Contacted a lady who'd had something removed. She had a big X-ray of it on the wall, and it almost looks like a saw because it had sharp bits on it. Do you know about that one?
Yeah, I've seen. I know the picture you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, most of the time there'll be kind of small, odd lumps of metal. Sometimes they'll be kind of sort of stick-shaped or T-shaped things, and quite often they're surrounded in a kind of membrane, almost like they're connected to the person's nervous system. Might potentially be monitoring the body or something like that. Other people believe that maybe they're a tracking device. You think, okay, it's just random lumps of metal, but it's not about that. It's about the composition. Yeah, the metals do not occur in nature in that composition. And sometimes there've been some cases, such as the ones that Roger's looked into, where they've emitted radio waves and things like that. There are cases where they actually tried to extract it, and it's actually moved up the person, like literally moved, when they've gone to grab it and things like that. There's very odd stuff going on with them, but they don't look like, they're not sort of detailed computer chips that you can just look at and be like, because that'd be evidence, wouldn't it? It could be like, there you go, I've got an alien implant, there you go, this is alien technology right here. So if you're trying to act covertly, how are you going to do that? What you're going to do is you're going to develop something that if people extract it, it's just an odd thing made out of different metals.
Yeah.
How that works, I don't know, but
we've got nothing to test it against either. How do you test it? How do you test it against anything? We've got nothing, have we, to do that? Right, Andy Gone Fishing, another one. Do you think that they use hydrogen or hydrology for their power plant or engine, hence why so many encounters in water? Yeah,
there's been a number of there's been quite a lot of cases where UFOs have been seen around reservoirs, around rivers. There's been some famous cases. There was an amazing one in Australia that happened where numerous people reported seeing a massive spherical shaped object sucking up water out of the lake, and that was reported to the police. You can actually hear the actual audio in the documentary. They actually show the audio samples of people calling the police saying there's an object out over the lake, it seems to be taking up water. Absolutely incredible. So they're using the water for something, whether they're using it for their power, maybe as some coolant, maybe to drink, who knows? But it probably is a coolant, but that would be just random guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interesting. And I think that it's no coincidence that a lot of them have been seen around reservoirs. That's all. So yeah, they are utilizing water for. But then there's also a lot of cases where they've been seen around power plants, around electrical towers and electrical power plants. So again, there's a link with that. Maybe soaking up electricity for whatever reason.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's just
wild. Yeah.
So wild guesses as well, isn't it? It's just to what is going on.
There's a lot of guesses in there, but I think the important thing with this subject is, even though we're still making guesses, the important thing is to look into it. Don't just kind of dismiss it or assume that it's not going on, because it is going on. Yes, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Yes, there are some questions that we may never get the answers to. or maybe we will, but only 500 years from now, or maybe we will next week when they decide to land and tell us all about exactly what they're doing. Who knows? But the important thing is to look at it, not to just ignore it and pretend like it's not going on, because it is.
Guessing and talking about it and mulling it over is the only way we're.
All we've got is observations, repeated observations from cases, and the more those observations, the more those aspects are repeated, the more you can say, yeah, that's definitely an aspect.
Yeah.
So, for example, last time we talked about the different types of beings that are seen. I could give you hundreds and hundreds of cases for each of those types of beings that would prove conclusively, I would say, that those are the main types that are seen. I'm not saying there aren't other types that are also seen, but there seems to be these main 4 types that show up again and again. So
I had a question. When they're in these laying on these tables having stuff done to them, is the room always pretty much the same? The description, or does it change a lot? Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. So quite often they'll be on some kind of bench-like or table-like structure, usually a couple of feet off the floor. Don't forget the greys are usually quite short, child height, and they need to see over, so the table will be kind of low down. Sometimes it can be up at an angle, and it's not always flat. Sometimes the person finds himself at a diagonal positioned on it. There'll usually be one or more lights above them, sometimes with an obvious source, other times just seemingly a glowing light of some kind. Usually the room is quite sparse. There might sometimes be control panels against walls, certain screens and buttons and that sort of thing, but usually not much furnishings. Reminds people a lot of time of sort of clinical, like a hospital or a doctor's office, because of the neatness of that. And sometimes the whole room can be glowing white. So the walls are glowing white, the floor. Sometimes, usually the room will be dome-shaped, will have no kind of lines or seams or rivets in it. Maybe sometimes doorways, maybe no doorways visible, and then a doorway will open and it will suddenly become visible. Sometimes you get odd things like the Droit Witch case where she was in that darkened space, but it was dark, so who knows? She had these laser lines around her, but if they'd switched the lights fully on, then maybe she would have seen exactly what other people have reported. It was dark. And there were other cases, like we talked about the Virginia case, Nottingham case, wherever. The gentleman now lives in Virginia, so Virginia contact case. But in his abduction experience as a child, room was darkened. There was one light source over the bench. The rest of the room around was pitch black. And the further he moved away from that, the darker it got. He couldn't really see much. But he said it didn't seem to be much in there.
That's interesting, isn't it? Is maybe what they're allowing you to see as well, or what you're blocking out.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they just seem to have in there what they need to do to, So there might sometimes be some instruments laid out for them to utilize. And by instruments, I mean sort of doctors' implements, things to take kind of skin samples, blood samples, etc.
Yeah. You wonder how many samples they need till they've worked out what they need to work out, don't you? Why?
Well, that's it.
The same old thing.
Because they're mixing. Yeah, I mean, you say why do they need multiple DNA samples off the same person? But it's trying to humanize something that isn't human. We don't know exactly what they're doing with those samples. Maybe they're seeing how those samples change over time. Maybe having a look at the actual structure to a detailed level. So they'll take numerous skin samples off a person to see how their skin's behaving and changing over the years. We don't know. I mean, some people do assume that there's a skeptical approach is, okay, surely they only need to take one DNA sample off a person and then they've got their DNA. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, they would have their DNA off one sample, but that's assuming that that's all that they're interested in and that's all that they're looking at. They could be looking into all sorts of aspects. We do repeat tests on animals in our scientific labs all the time, don't we? So
if we're testing something on them, we're testing using them, aren't we? We're using them to test things. So, it's interesting. I've got a question here from Tim. Hello, Tim. Do you believe they have been conducting a long-term tweaking and monitoring of our race and planet?
I would say that's a very, very, very good possibility, because we've got historical evidence that these things have been here for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And that historical evidence, when you start looking into it, is quite dramatic. Now, I'm not just talking about Ancient Aliens. You might have heard the TV program, and this is the viewpoint that alien species have visited our planet in the past and given us technology and caused jumps in our evolution. And that is entirely possible. Yeah, the Mayans knew a lot about our star systems and things they couldn't have possibly have known without sort of advanced telescopes. How would they have built advanced telescopes back then, thousands of years ago? So they're very interesting things. You've got the whole thing with Egypt and the pyramids and how exactly whether they were built, etc. So there's lots of interesting things like that. There's cave paintings that seemingly depict spacecraft. There are cave paintings that actually show abductions, believe it or not, and people being zapped by beams of light, cavemen being zapped by beams of light from something that looks distinctly like a domed disc-shaped object. Oh. There are cave paintings from Australia showing things that look very, very much like grey beings, sometimes with what appears to be kind of helmets on, sort of clear helmets around their heads. You could say that some of these are depictions of ancient gods or whatever, and that's entirely true. But when we're talking about ancient gods, sky gods coming down,
an alien is just something that's not on this planet. Yeah. Could be absolutely anything, couldn't it? And,
so if you said they've been here a long time, back to the question, if you say they've been here a long time, then they've got to be up to something here. Why would they be here for thousands of years and just fly around our skies doing anything, just looking at us? They're not going to be doing that. They're going to be doing some kind of ongoing project.
Yeah.
And one of the viewpoints is that they are slowly manipulating our species, making genetic changes so minute that it wouldn't be picked up in any one particular generation. It's not like they're going to vastly change a person, because right there, just like the implant thing, our scientists would look at that and we've got conclusive evidence that this person's been altered by another species. So it's not like that. But there's nothing to say that they haven't slowly been changing things over generations, undetectable.
Yeah. Did I see another question? What would the sociological ramifications be if the long-term population were to be informed about long-term visitation?
That's a big question. That's a very good but very big question. It would change the world in so many different ways. It really, really would. In terms of our religions, people are like, okay, it would affect certain religions, because certain religions believe that the Earth is special and that there couldn't be advanced life forms elsewhere in the universe. Now, a lot of religions are not like that anymore and have accepted the possibility, probably due to the vastness of the universe. They probably looked at that and thought, "Come on, there's got to be this ginormous place. There's got to be other life forms out there." So that's an interesting one, but it would destabilize society in a variety of ways. The problem is, a lot of people would not be able to cope with the darker aspects of this subject, and by that I mean abductions and I mean animal mutilations and things. And if the governments were to say we can't do anything to stop this, we can't actually stop them from doing this, that would cause a hell of a lot of panic with people. It does affect you when you take this on as reality. I'm not going to tell you there haven't been times where I've been really, really creeped out by this subject. And when the reality of that hits you, that they are actually doing this and are flying around and are taking people from their cars and houses against their will, all I've got to go on really is the odds of that happening to me personally are quite low. Still doesn't stop it being creepy as anything, as you say. So I think that a lot of people wouldn't be able to cope with that. They would insist that the governments or the military stopped it from happening, and they would then say we can't, and then we'd never trust our governments again. Not that a lot of people don't trust them anyway, but they would also have to admit that they'd been lying since the 1940s about this, and countless times had said these things don't exist. Although technically they have actually already come out with that announcement in late 2017, when the Pentagon openly admitted it had run this top secret program. And they haven't said the alien word. They haven't said they're extraterrestrial. What they've said is that there are advanced objects performing maneuvers that are outperforming the American military vastly, and that they've got them on camera and they've been seen. Well, what's that going to point to? It's very unlikely that another military force like the Japanese or the Russians or something have built these things. If you go across there, they're looking at cases of these exactly like everybody else. This is a worldwide thing. Everybody's looking into it. It's not from any particular country because it's from outside wherever outside is, whether you believe whether it's outside in space or another dimension or from our future sent back, whatever you believe they come from, it's not human made. It really isn't. So, yeah, it's quite absolutely fascinating. But I don't think, but I think that announcement is kind of like disclosure on a small scale. It's not the disclosure everybody wanted. What everybody wants is for all the governments to say, okay, enough's enough. This is real. We've got evidence. Here you go. Have a look. This is some dead aliens that we had back in the 1940s. But then people would just say it was fake. They would just say that, oh, that's a video. It's a fake video you're showing us. It's some sort of and it's some sort of thing for promoting fear in the population or whatever. It would have to be a live alien would have to get up and talk to people.
Yeah,
people would have to be like, okay, this isn't special effects. This is actually real, and that reality would take a long time to sink in. If they just come out right, especially if they came out right now with COVID and everything, and said all this, people wouldn't believe it. They'd be like, "This is some sort of scaremongering going on." And a lot of people believe that might be coming at some point. Believe that they're going to do some sort of false flag involving the UFO subject.
Let's hope it doesn't get to some sort of War of the Worlds kind of scenario where those big things are walking through and we haven't got, this is what it's all about.
That would imply them being malevolent, which I don't think they are. I think if they were malevolent, we would have found out about it a long time ago. They could, with their technology, if they wanted to, they could destroy us just like that.
Yeah, I know.
And they haven't, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. But anything that's but whatever the agenda is, that's a problem when you don't know what the agenda is. They could be playing with us for however long.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mentioned the nukes thing earlier on, actually, and this kind of feeds back into that a bit. The nukes thing is very, very interesting. It's a particular aspect of the subject where there's been numerous cases on most military bases that have had nuclear weapons on them at one point or another. It feeds into some of the biggest UFO cases on record, this aspect, and it's still going on today. Roswell is one of the most famous early cases, the first major case that brought this into the public eye, 1947, the infamous UFO crash at Roswell. Now, it's no coincidence that they were testing nuclear weapons out in the New Mexico desert. I believe there was activity in that area because of that. And they would have been checking out that, and whether that craft was brought down or whether it was an accident, many people believe it came down in a lightning storm and it got struck by a bolt of lightning, and then people are like, okay, surely it wouldn't have got struck down by a bolt of lightning. These advanced beings that are massively they've got all this amazing technology and they get hit by a bolt of lightning? Surely not. And I say, well, why not? They're fallible. These things are fallible. Yeah, they're quite frail. In fact, greys are quite slender and quite frail. And if they come through to our physical reality, then why couldn't they be damaged or brought down? There are a number of cases on record where jets have apparently shot down UFOs and recovered live or dead beings from the craft. And that's us being malicious, not them.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. It's just, perspective, isn't it? Whatever end you're on, and however you're experiencing it. Let me just grab this Orbs Realm. Orbs Realm. I'd love you to come on Hidden Existence and talk about your orbs. So let me know if I do talk about you a lot. I send quite a few people to your channel because I'm fascinated with your orbs. So if you'd like to come on, get in touch.
I've worked directly with Richard Hall, so there's a number of years ago where I took, because Richard focuses on very specific subjects, and he gets a lot of investigations come through his way, a lot of cases reported via his website, and he started working directly with me for a period of years. Those cases that I wrote up that came from Richard's website through to myself, I wrote them all up, and they're all on the BUFOG website. And you'll see it there, and I've noted at the top that they've came from Richard D. Hall's site.
Right.
The thing is, it got too much. See, Richard's very, very popular in the community and well known, and because of that, he was getting at least one new case in a day. They were all coming my way. It was like a flood of cases. Now, I like to properly give people the time of day, whether people have seen just a light in the sky, or whether they've had full blown contact their entire life. I like to give them the time of day, and these cases are coming in too fast for me to keep in touch with. It was getting ridiculous. I was writing up several case reports a night and this sort of thing, and it was just getting out of hand. So I called back on it, and essentially now Richard just passes occasional cases to me rather than the full whack coming through, because there were just so many coming through his website. But yeah, I worked with him for at least a couple of years on that as a direct collaboration with him.
I love his website. I love his videos. I like how he does it.
Fascinating stuff.
He goes straight to the horse, doesn't he? He doesn't he goes straight to the source and gets as much information as he can.
He's covered some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. What are the MIB? Known group or unknown?
Very interesting. So yeah, the Men in Black are obviously quite infamous because of the movies, the comedy films, but they are very real, and they'll show up occasionally with contact cases. I'd say in about sort of 10% or maybe 5% of the cases I've investigated have had Men in Black encounters. Now, most of these encounters, they seem to be quite human. It's just people in suits, usually wear dark shades, and they seem to be performing some kind of surveillance of the individual. They'll sometimes tap their phone, or the individual believes their phone's been tapped. They may see them sitting around or sort of monitoring them, sitting in cars across the streets, that sort of thing. Sometimes they've got more direct and vocal, and they've come and actually asked them questions about their experiences at the door. Now, the famous view of the Men in Black is that they're trying to cover this all up and stop information from getting out. And there are some cases on record where that's happened, where they've properly warned people, you're not allowed to talk about this, and we'll kill you and your family if you talk about this, and this sort of thing. But more often than not, they just seem interested in, and they seem to be trying to gather information about the beings, about the ETs or whatever, from the contactees themselves. So they'll ask them questions, or maybe monitor to hear what they're saying about their experiences over the phone, this sort of thing. And I've dealt with it. There's an incredible case that took place that came by me. I think it was last year, or maybe the year before now. How time flies. But it was a case from Moseley in Birmingham. And with this case, the gentleman had a couple of several UFO sightings on one night. One was it was a comet-shaped glowing object with a tail. There was something large and cloaked. It caught the edge of it briefly lit up the edge of some sort of big disc that was there in the sky. And later on that same evening, from his bedroom window, he saw a flattened domed disc, so basically flat on the bottom and dome over the top. And it was in a distance, and it came in over his garden, and then he tried to communicate with it, and it flipped up like this and sort of rotated almost in response to him. Now, what happened with this, what's amazing about this case, he moved address, so years and years go by, about 12 years later or something, and he moved away from that original address. He's now at a new location, and he hadn't really said much about this case to anybody. He hadn't properly officially reported it, so it wasn't officially reported online or anything. And he had contacted the Birmingham Weather Observatory to find out whether there was any odd weather conditions reported that night, because he was trying to find out what it may or may have not have been. So, and they said that no, there was nothing on. But he hadn't really given his name. He definitely hadn't given his address or told him about, I saw some UFOs or anything like that. He didn't say anything like that. Anyway, what happened was about 12 years later, he gets a knock on his door one afternoon, answers the door, and there's a gentleman about sort of 50 years old and a younger lady with blonde hair. They're both wearing very smart black suits. The lady apparently had a black briefcase in her hand, like a black bag of some kind. And they talked to him by name. They knew his first name straight away. And they also knew he was at that address, even though he moved address from when he'd had the experience. And they said, we believe you saw a number of objects a number of years ago. We'd like to talk to you about that experience. And he was really puzzled. But he didn't really know how they'd found out. But he said, yeah. And he actually asked him in, and they went and sat down in the lounge with him. And they started to talk and ask him questions about it. And they were asking him things like, we understand you tried communicating with the object. And he hadn't told any of these details to anybody. And he was like, I don't know this. And they were asking him these questions about it. And then they get out this folder out the bag. This just sounds wild. I mean, this is just wild. But I spoke with the guy in quite good depth, and I believe this is legit. She pulls out this ring binder, and she starts flicking through it. And there's loads of photographs of different UFOs in the binder. You can see her flicking past the page with loads of photos, some black and white, some colour. And she gets to one particular page and she holds it up and she says, "Is this what you saw?" And she holds it up. And he said it was the picture of the comet-looking thing with the tail, the first thing he'd seen while outside his house for earlier in the evening, right? But it wasn't just the object. He said the position of it was exactly how he remembered it, almost like it had been taken from his own eyes. Yeah, so it was the exact position where he'd been looking up at it. That was what the picture showed, that exactly how he remembered it looking. And he was like, and she flicks again through the binder, and she says, "Is this the next object you saw?" And it was the flattened disc thing that he'd seen when he was back home. And again, it was from an angle that looked like they'd been standing right next to him, like it had been plucked directly out of his head and turned into a photograph. And he was totally like completely puzzled. And by this point, he knew something was really off, because how did they know all this information? How did they know anything about it? So he starts to ask them questions, who are you guys, this sort of thing. And they claim to be from a UFO group that were looking into historical cases. And he said, "Have you got details? What's the name of your group?" And they start to get really, really shifty and essentially get up and leave. They won't give him any more information about who they are. But they knew where he lived, and they knew his first name, and they knew what he'd seen, and they had photographs of what he'd seen. Now, you could say, okay, maybe they found out somehow he'd had this experience and tracked him down or whatever, and maybe there were other witnesses, but it still leaves the photographs and the fact that the angles were like exactly how he remembered them from where he'd seen them. It doesn't make sense. It's like it's just such a bizarre case and everything, but I've got no reason to doubt it. The gentleman's partner, she backed it up, and she hadn't seen the people, but she backed up remembering them coming downstairs and go and sit with him and everything. So incredible.
It's like they've taken a snapshot of his memory.
Yeah, and if you say, well, if they've done that, then that tends to suggest that they're not fully human, doesn't it? That there's something odd going on with them. And there are cases of Men in Black where they've appeared very, very unusual, and they've been sort of and sometimes sort of had glowing eyes, or sometimes seemed very like kind of like living mannequins and haven't almost like aliens trying to act like humans and take on the persona of humans, like a screen memory or whatever. And it might be a mix of the two. You might get some cases that are like that, and other cases where they really are governmental agents, either trying to look into this or try to cover it up, a mix of the two.
Yeah. I mean, those that, I mean, if they are trying to, fob you off, if it is government, they must feel like you're really close to something important if they're going to go that far to, what do they possibly think you can do? I mean, one person has an experience, and yet it's obviously very sensitive.
It depends on what's happened with that individual. It might be who the individual is in the community, or it might be because of something particular that they've seen, a particular thing that they don't want getting out. They seem to be very, very secretive of things involving the military. Yeah, so if there's any essence that the military's been involved, or indication that the military's covered up something from the public about it, they don't like that. And there've been some cases where particularly ufologists have gone digging on particular cases and have been warned and threatened over the phone by mysterious people telling them to stop what they're doing. And in some cases they have, and in other cases they carried on anyway. Now, most of the time they don't seem to care. I've released hundreds of case reports, and I've never been sort of threatened directly about releasing those reports. Right. They do monitor UFO groups. They monitor the activity of what's going on. I've seen there's evidence of that. There's been documents that have come out through the Freedom of Information Act where they're monitoring UFO programs that go on TV and the manuscripts. There was one that came out many years ago. This is going way back now, but essentially it was a program a standard program on TV about UFOs, a chat show, and it'd been released. They've got hold of the documents. And it was basically just a transcript of what people had said on the show, but who it had gone to was incredible. At the top right, it showed who it had been posted to, and it had gone down to the Houses of Parliament, it had gone across to the White House, it had gone to the MOD, it had gone to the CIA, FBI, it had gone to other unknown agencies who nobody knew who they were. Now, why on earth would the White House be interested in a UK-based program on UFOs if there wasn't something important being talked about in that show? You have to ask yourself that. That's
Yeah.
the evidence speaks for itself. That was, it's a document that showed that it had been posted to those locations. So if anybody tells me that there's no cover-up going on with this subject, I say to that, absolute rubbish. And if you look at some of the documents that have come out from the Freedom of Information Act about UFOs, you'll see page after page that have been completely blacked out. Yeah, not just people's names or very, very important information. Like entire paragraphs, entire pages completely blacked out. None of that information they felt was publicly viewable for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's definitely something going on.
Yeah.
Now, I've got more questions, but I also know you wanted to talk about some of the stuff. So what do you want to do? Do you want to go through the questions, or do you want to come back for part 3 with the other stuff?
Let's leave the other stuff for part 3 because there's a hell of a lot in it. And
okay.
it's something I've looked into quite a lot. Yeah, how the UFOs are portrayed through media, through music, through movies, through video games, etc. And there's a hell of a lot of very interesting stuff with that linked into that. And that's you're absolutely right. That's enough for a kind of separate talk show entirely.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the questions. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. Nobody knows again, 808. Dave, what do you think about the Hindu ancient story? They describe exactly what a nuclear warhead looks like when it's set off.
No, that I don't know about that particular thing, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I do know about the Vimanas, which are ancient craft talked about in manuscripts. I believe they're Hindu. Maybe Hindu. Sorry if they're not. Anybody listening, and they're not. But Vimanas are essentially, we go back to the historical evidence for UFOs. Yeah, so they've got these ancient manuscripts with these Vimana craft, which were kind of cone-shaped objects that were flying around, and they'd actually drawn how they were being flown with, sometimes with propellers and things. Very, very odd indeed.
I don't know about them. Undergone fishing. What about the smiling man encounters?
Did we have that as a question last time or not?
I can't remember last time.
We might have, I know what the smiling man encounters are, but I haven't had anyone directly report any of those to me.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's these other entities that are sometimes seen.
Yeah,
but
this is possibly a similar question from Zach from Rooted Expeditions. Is a Slender Man or Rake related to these UFO encounters?
Yeah, so Slender Man is a creepypasta. It's an internet kind of based fable that's kind of spread out and become its own mythology. Yeah, so there's people claiming that Slender Man's a kind of real. It's a kind of creepy story, which has kind of developed its own thing. I'm not saying that there couldn't actually be some sort of reality to it behind it, but a lot of the stories about Slender Man and about what it is and how it attacks people and this sort of thing it's made up. It's maybe made up creepy kind of Halloween type story. But yeah, it does have similarities. It definitely has some very interesting similarities with both Men in Black and Greys. So
interesting.
May have had some of their influences from it. They may have themed some of the aspects of the UFO subject and incorporated them into this mythology.
Okay. I had one. I can't believe I've just... Hang on, let me go back. It was from Tim. I'm pretty sure it was from Tim. Here we go. What UFO researchers do you respect and or recommend? Richard Dolan, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins?
All of those names he's put down there, very, very good researchers. There are lots and lots of researchers that I highly respect in the UFO community. I don't want to particularly name or not name people, too much, because I don't want to offend anybody if I haven't mentioned them. I think Gary Heseltine and Alan Foster are superb UK-based researchers. But there are many, many people out there. We've had many researchers come and talk at our group. Richard Hall, as you said, very, very good researcher. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on with names. We've had lots and lots of people come and speak over the years at BUFOG, and also people I know through being on the lecture circuit with UFOs and know very, very well.
Yeah. I got an email today about the lapis. Oh, where did I see it on your Greek, maybe. You're going to
Possibly,
be
yeah. I'm going to be at Lapis, yeah.
Yeah, that's not far from me. I'm going to go this year.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
yeah.
I'll come and meet you.
I've not spoken at Lapis before. I've been up there a few times to the conference.
Yeah.
But I've not officially spoken at the conference before. I'm going to be talking about some of the most impressive UFO and contact cases. May have some links with some of the things we've talked about here, but that's absolutely fine.
That's in October, I think, and that's going to be in St Anne's up near Blackpool Way. If anyone's around this area in the UK, get up to the Lapis.
Totally, yeah.
Because they're supposed to be really good, and Jackie Tonks is going to be there as well, and I've had Jackie on the show, so she'll be great to listen to as well.
We should be up there for the whole weekend, so if it's nice weather in the evening, may potentially do a bit of sky watching out on the dunes as well. So
yeah, that'd be nice, definitely. Hi Jamie, are you familiar with the Chris Bledsoe?
I'm not actually. I'll have to have a look into that. Yeah, as I say, there's so many cases out there, so many, and to know them all would be difficult. But I'll certainly look into it.
Yeah. Okay. I think we talked about this last time, Andy.
Yeah.
The different types. There's
so I'll briefly go over that just to answer the question. Yeah. So the main 4 types that turn up again and again and again with the cases I've investigated, which I've not just focused on UK cases, although I've dealt with cases from all around the world. So it's what it is. But you've got the greys, the ones with the big black eyes. You've got Nordics or humanoids. So ones that look very, very human. Reptilians, so more sort of lizard men type looking things, and mantids that look quite insectoid, very tall and thin, and very insect-like. There are other species as well that are sometimes reported, sort of beings that look a bit feline-like. There are very, very short little things that are sometimes seen by people, but they're quite rare. But they're usually about a foot high or a foot and a half high, short little dwarf things. Sometimes seem to help the greys with abductions. There's the big case, the Whitley Strieber case from America, which got turned into the film Communion. There we go. We go back to UFOs and movies, and then we'll get to that next time. But anyway, he reported that with his experiences. So he saw these little guys, and they usually wear kind of hooded robes, and they're sometimes very, very frightening for whatever reason, for people to look directly at. And then there are other cases where unusual being, like particular individual cases where beings have been seen that don't appear to be like the Hopkinsville famous case where a family got tormented by a bunch of these small gremlin-like creatures with pointy ears. Now, some people believe that case to be a hoax or a fabrication or whatever, but it was, they apparently they found there was some sort of craft in the woods, and these beings apparently attacked their farmhouse for a period of time, and they shot at them and eventually moved away. And the neighbors said that they were so terrified of what had happened, they'd moved away from the residents. But they went into the town and went down the police station and said what was going on, and they didn't go out to see them. And apparently they come back a second time, and when they went round there, they just found the place had been abandoned. There was bullet holes all over the place, so they'd quite clearly panicked and been shooting at something. But some people believe that maybe it was sort of horned owls in the woods, and they were just seeing these and interpreting them as beings with these big eyes. But if not, then that was an unusual species. There's the Varginha case in Brazil. This is an incredible case, absolutely incredible. Now with that one, there was a UFO crash or landing that occurred in the outskirts of this village called Varginha. And what happened was a number of beings were seen around the village by numerous villagers, including 3 girls who saw one crouching down against a wall, and they thought it was the devil. They looked a bit like greys, but they had brown skin, or you could say maybe they were covered in some sort of fluid that was making the skin that color. And they had 3 bumps on their head, and they had red eyes instead of black eyes. But to all intents, there could have been a sort of subspecies of grey. And apparently the military moved in. This is stunning. If you don't know this case, it's incredible. But the military moved in and apparently caught the things alive in nets, turned up in a military vehicle, got out of these nets and actually captured the things in front of people and took them away, and then denied it had ever happened. but they've got loads of villagers on camera talking about it, saying that they've seen these things. Apparently, one of them they took alive down to a local hospital and were examining it in the hospital. They got it on because they thought it was hurt in some way, and pulled out this long kind of extended tongue out of it and things. It's just an absolutely incredible case.
Yeah.
Now, you could say that's a subspecies of grey, because there are lots of different greys that are seen. Some are big, some are short. Different colours are seen. You know, some are kind of bluish toned. Some of them are completely blue in colour. Some of them are kind of greenish brown colour. Usually kind of palish, like pale grey is the standard. But sometimes they can be completely white, you know, and almost glowing. They're so kind of white. So lots of different colours seen with them. But then you get that with humans too. So. Why would that be a shock to anybody?
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brandon says, Dave, look up the Brahmastra. It's the weapon used in the historical texts.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah. So again, that's going to link back to ancient technology and have kind of things that we see in the modern world that these ancient texts or ancient pictures seem to be depicting. And so it's really, really interesting. It does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I obviously tend to focus on things that are happening now because as an active UFO investigator, there's only so far you can go with stuff that's happened in the past. You know, I like to be on the front lines with this and speak with real people who are experiencing real things or seen things earlier in their life and can recount them to me directly.
Yeah. Max, we're going to cover this in part 3, which is an index, the types of the crafts that are out there.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do that tonight, but we'll definitely cover that. But I'm just going to it is, yeah. I'm just going to put a link to Richard Hall's channel for anyone who's interested in all the UFO stuff, because he's got some fascinating stuff. Now, I've got links for you in the description, but I don't have your YouTube channel. I didn't realize you had one. Have you got one?
Sorry, me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I haven't got the link for that for some reason.
Oh, that's just Birmingham. If you just search for Birmingham UFO Group on YouTube, it'll come up. So what that's got in there mostly is the videos that are embedded inside the reports. So you'll see the videos, but looking at the videos on their own is not the recommended way of doing it. I would say, for example, the Droitwich video is in there. Yeah, it's in the videos, but I wouldn't just look at the video. I would open up the Droitwich case on the Birmingham UFO Group website, because I'll have the full evidence for it, the full analysis. I have stills and everything with the video linked into it.
Okay.
A video is only part of the picture. People always obsess about video footage of UFOs. Yeah. These days, because of all the fakery and trickery that goes on, they've become less and less important, and the testimonial evidence itself has become more and more important. But the best thing is where you've got both, where you've got testimonial evidence and the video to back it up, and vice versa. And looking at both sides of the story, you have to look at it all the evidence.
Yeah. So I'm going to put a link up now to the channel. Everyone go and check out the channel and check out the site to connect those two things up together. Go and give them a sub as well and get their subs up on the channel there. I'm not in it for that. I'm just if you want to subscribe to I suppose if you subscribe, then you'll see when we add new ones, and that'll give you a heads up that there's new videos have been looked into. Yeah. So and Zach's, I've just put the link up for it, Zach. And have we got any more questions? How would Dave say ufology is changing over time?
I like Timmy's asking some very good questions.
Isn't he? With the questions.
It's slowly becoming more accepted by society, I would say. I think that that's in part been helped by what happened with the Pentagon's admissions, because that's an official body coming out and saying there's something going on with this. They haven't said we've got little grey guys here, have a look at the bodies or anything like that. And they haven't said that they're extraterrestrial, but they have alluded to the fact that something is happening with advanced things that are performing incredible maneuvers and outmaneuvering their aircraft, which is extremely significant. And they've released a number of gun camera videos with that as well. You can find those on YouTube. I 100% believe those are the real deal. The Pentagon recently admitted they're the real deal. Some people felt the timing of that was odd in the middle of the COVID crisis to reveal it then. Maybe they were trying to dumb it down, but maybe not. Who knows? Maybe it's just going through the motions and they finally got round to. But they basically confirmed that those videos are real, and they've also been backed up by high military personnel, naval commanders, etc. So I certainly believe they're real, and that's military pilots reacting to objects. We're not talking about up close, it's a flying saucer. It's an object at a distance, because as I said last time, they're acting covertly. They generally keep their distance from planes, but they're recording it on official cameras, and it's performing incredible right angle turns and things, and they're reacting to what they're seeing it do. Very, very significant videos.
Yeah, it's definitely seeing something out of the ordinary, aren't they?
Yeah.
We'll have one more question from Nobody Knows again. Dave, has anyone ever experienced heavy wind blowing around them and the ground below them feeling like people pounding on a cardboard door that you are sitting on? People 20 foot away didn't experience it.
Not directly that I can think of. There are cases where odd anomalies have happened around contact. All sorts of odd anomalies. So people feel they're being pulled in particular directions. People's strange smells, that sort of thing, but not that directly that I can think of. If I think through the cases, nothing's coming immediately to mind. That doesn't mean there's not cases on record. Yeah, I've dealt with about 300 or so cases. There are thousands of contact cases on record, thousands and thousands. So maybe some other researchers have got cases where that's happened. There's lots of aspects to it.
Yeah, Brandon's just said Joe Rogan interviewed the pilot of that squadron.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, it was an interesting interview. Yeah. So that pilot decided to go public with that. Whether that was done by the Pentagon, whether they wanted him to go public and said you're going to go public and told him, or whether he just did that off his own back, we don't know. But yeah, seeing the interviews with him, it's immediately obvious that he's talking about something real that he saw. It comes across very, very believable and compelling, I would say. Yeah.
And it was filmed at the time, recorded at the time, wasn't it? You could tell.
Yeah. And it goes back to the USO thing we were talking about earlier on, underwater unidentified submerged objects. So in the sea. So we had a question earlier on about objects under the sea. So with the Tic Tac incident, the USS Nimitz incident, the object was seen and recorded, but there was also something going on. The object was over a large patch of seawater that was disrupted by something. There was something underneath the surface that they couldn't see, a larger object of some kind. Either that or some sort of energy disruption from the object. But it seems more likely that there was something else there. There was another craft that was out of sight, and they could just see they could see the disruption on the waves. Yeah,
I've also heard about those that go into the water and you don't see anything happening as well. Was it myth?
Oh, yeah.
They tried to do a myth bust it somehow by finding the speed or whatever to not create a.
So with the no splash or anything. Yeah, so that there, it links with the capabilities of these things and the way that they can just stop on a dime and shoot off really fast. Yeah, they appear to be acting outside of our own atmosphere, and the normal laws that apply to us. Like they've got a field separating themselves from what's going on outside. So it doesn't matter about wind conditions or anything like that. So the same would apply to water. So they can enter water and it not disrupt at all. Just go straight in. So yeah, absolutely fascinating.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating. We've done 2 hours. I think we've covered quite a lot tonight. There is so much detail, isn't there? Yeah. And it's been fascinating. Really appreciate you coming back on. We'll do a part 3 then.
Sure, yeah, why not?
It's ongoing, isn't it? It's never ending.
Yeah. Well, I've done some proper lectures on how UFOs are portrayed by the media, so it'd be interesting to go over some of that information with you. And it's I think your viewers will find that fun as well, because it'll give them some things they can go and check out or get involved with afterwards as well. Yeah. So.
That'd be great. Right. For some reason, because I've got let me find it. I don't know what's wrong with these people in the chat, but they love this word being said by English people for some reason.
So critter, like critter. I've got to say the word critter.
You've done it. You've done it. I hope everyone's happy.
Is that good? Yeah. Should I put in a Brummie accent, critter?
Critter. I think that was a bit scouse. That. But anyway, thanks everyone. Thanks for the great questions tonight. They were really good questions.
Yeah, thank you,
Dave. Yeah, and I'll be here on Sunday night for Anything Goes. So join me then. Dave, we'll have you back on again. We'll arrange a time, and all the links for Dave's site, his Facebook group page, everything is in the description. So go and check him out. And hope you guys all have a good evening. Good night.
Thanks all.